Let me begin by discussing a standard by which to measure affirmation and or alienation. Namely, this is the standard, the dignity of the human person. In my judgment, and here I stand in a long humanistic tradition, human dignity is grounded in two distinct but internally related types of freedom. The natural freedom of self-determination and the circumstantial freedom of self-realization. I understand the natural freedom of self-determination to mean the natural ability to choose among genuinely open alternatives. That is, a freedom for shaping one's own future, or helping to shape the institution to which one belongs or works. This freedom, the natural freedom, must be attributed to all persons, women and men alike. Even though a wide range of alternatives were denied women, historically, to just cite one glaring and horrific example, and thus women were alienated from their own power of choice, or what Karl Marx would say, from their own nature as persons. Which is to say that women were traditionally denied the circumstantial freedom of self-realization. That is to say, favorable circumstances in which to exercise their natural freedom. The ability to choose is powerless without favorable circumstances. Let us define circumstantial freedom as a freedom from external constraint or unnatural internal impediments. So for my purposes here today, it is to this latter freedom, to circumstantial freedom, that I wish to direct my observations and conclusions. Denial of circumstantial freedom by imposing unreasonable external constraints is an affront to human dignity. With this as a standard of measure, let me turn now to cases of affirmation and or alienation that I have garnered from many conversations over the years and recent email messages from directors and deans of study abroad programs in Italy. Conversations fundamentally relating to the relationship between the local campus, the study abroad campus, and the home campus. So my approach is thus phenomenological. That is, I'm tapping into and reporting the lived experience of some of the persons in charge of programs in Italy. Their common themes supported by stories, anecdotes. Now, there's obviously a broad range of types of study abroad programs. I consulted principally with directors of genuine semester-long American programs, and thus not to the non-American, European Union and Australian programs, nor I did not consult with the for-profit segment of study abroad. And so my research and my findings are limited. Okay. Let's start with affirmation. Many directors, and I was pleased that Sasha ended on an affirming note, Many directors have been wonderfully positive about their relation with the home campus, citing a collaborative, consultative, and power-sharing approach to decision-making. Collaborative, consultative, and power-sharing in decision-making. And their consequent feeling of deep respect from the home administration. Relative to the many examples of alienation that are discussed in my talk here today, they indicate that their respective institution has matured over the years, has matured beyond that condition of alienation that is reported by so many. Just a small example of affirmation from my own experience as dean at Gonzaga in Florence. When the question of productivity came up relative to small classes, and we all know this is a big problem. The academic vice president of Gonzaga University approved my proposal for measuring productivity not on the basis of the individual professor, but rather on that of the curricular division. It would be that of our social science track, our Renaissance track, our business track, our engineering track, our teacher education track, or the classics track. We also have something in the studio arts. I mean, basically, the university that usually requires that a class has at least 8 students in order to qualify for being funded. I was able to successfully argue that 8 students would be the average of all classes in a particular curricular division, with 5 students being the minimum of any single class within that curricular division, thus permitting and fostering a more creative approach to curriculum design, especially team-taught interdisciplinary courses. In spring 2012, I taught with a colleague from Spokane, which is the town of where the home campus is. I taught an interdisciplinary course on the philosophy and literature of the Florentine Renaissance. Initially, she had 5 students and I had 11, and so we were within the productivity guidelines of an average of 8. This new productivity measure permits us also to maintain our upper division Italian language program, our Italian language courses, where enrollments can be quite low. We have an Italian language requirement, and some of our talented students in Italian want to continue, but there aren't many. And I keep trying to convince them that all the students, by learning Italian, you break the stranglehold of English on your consciousness. And even the perceptual field changes. A tree is no longer a tree, it's albero. It's a marvel. I mean, it looks differently if they'll attend to it. And the great Italian teachers know how to get them to attend to this shift in the perceptual field and the field of presence. Let me take an example of affirmation in confrontation with alienation. Let me report then another example from my own lived experience of affirmation by the upper administration of Gonzaga University when confronted with an alienating situation that will become clear as I read the following letter to the Associate Academic Vice President to whom I reported. Names have been changed to preserve confidentiality. George, thanks for the heads up on this. My deanship doesn't officially begin until the 1st of June, and Brunhilde is already attempting to colonize the curriculum here, under the rubric of her, quote, advisory committee. Let me begin my response by clarifying for you my experience of what Brunhilde means by collaboration. It means control. She wants to run the program. I can't understand why she didn't apply for the deanship. Who gives her or her advisory committee the authority to set the curriculum in Florence? In my interview with the A&M Arts and Sciences Focus Group, which she and Siegfried ran, I indicated that I was planning to offer a Renaissance honors track. She makes no mention of that in her letter to the Arts and Sciences Dean, clearly indicating that she intends to preempt or usurp my efforts to determine the curriculum here. One of my areas of expertise is curriculum development. I will not be in an advisory position to her or to her committee. On the contrary, they have advisory authority to my office. She sees me as, my role, as offering, quote, feedback to her committee, which determines in her mind the Florence curriculum. On the contrary, she can give me feedback. I cannot have her dictate to me that a course, for example, in criminal justice 465 must use certain prescribed texts thus an affront to the academic freedom of the professor. George, we are at a defining moment. Whether the dean in Florence gets to be the dean. When I negotiated with the academic vice president for the interim deanship, I insisted that I have reasonable autonomy relative to the curriculum and the hiring of faculty. And the same holds today. Such autonomy, in my judgment, is based on a dialogical model of genuine collaboration with the various offices on the Spokane campus. The relationship is symmetrical, not asymmetrical. Brunhilde wants the latter. I will not accept this. I cannot be the secretary or errand boy to anyone, nor as dean am I simply the chief bottle washer or the tallier of votes. I want to be creatively and collaboratively self-determining relative to every aspect of the program. I need the support of the upper administration, the support of the deans, the chairs, and the faculty in order for me to do the work that I'm hired to do. If I have a misconception of the role of the Dean of Gonzaga in Florence, please inform me now so that I can take my bearings in the job realistically, or if necessary, resign before I am officially in the post. George's response was overwhelmingly positive, agreeing with all my points, and informing Brunhilde and Siegfried of his support for my position. Obviously, I was tremendously pleased, and so I'm still here today. Now we get to topic of alienation. And yeah, it is, a lot of this is negative. But it needs to be said, it's what was told to me, and we need to be able to address that constructively in the days to come. Perhaps the harshest accusation I heard pertaining to this theme was, quote, the power brokers on the home campus have no interest in the study abroad program, except for self-serving purposes. Now, Sasha brought up some references to the way in which it can be very lucrative for the home campus. That might be a self-serving purpose. This attitude is often expressed in terms of the lack of job security, the lack of informed consent, the lack of insurance, the lack of staffing, the lack of budgetary support, and the lack of trust. Let me briefly touch on each of these. And I'm speaking here regarding, these were all directors that I spoke with. Lack of job security on the part of deans and directors is manifest by the fact that in many of the states in the USA, contracts and letters of appointment are often governed by what's called the at-will rule. That is, you can be terminated at the will of the employer with little notice, and you as well can, with little notice, leave your employment. My supervisor indicated from the beginning that the university, Gonzaga University, would have to show, quote, just cause. The trustees would demand that if I were to be terminated from my employment. It could not be done, in other words, frivolously. How do you say that? Frivolously. I've lost the capacity to speak English. But the perceptual field out here is very interesting. Lack of job security can be exacerbated by administrative discontinuity in a time of institutional transition on the home campus, with the director having to often adjust to a new supervisor who may have a different set of expectations that will limit the range of operative alternatives for the director of the study abroad program. I've had 4 supervisors in the last 9 years, 4 academic vice presidents. And I've had to negotiate with each a shared set of expectations regarding Gonzaga and Florence. And fortunately, I've been successful. But not everyone with whom I spoke on this question reported this. Many reported that they had to adjust negatively towards the expectations of a new supervisor. who didn't understand international education or intercultural involvement. There's also a lack of informed choice, and what was reported to me was basically the lack of front-loaded critical information to deans and directors relative to responsibilities and legal consequences, including penal consequences, should it be judged that there was neglect on the part of the director. Consequences that could include jail time and the loss of personal property, to cite just a few examples. Now, who judges? Well, it could be a tribunal that happens to have been misguided, but these consequences are very serious. It would help to know this in advance so as to make an informed choice regarding accepting the position of legal representative and director. So many people said, we found out afterwards, but I went ahead and bought a house, and I need to pay that mortgage. I don't want to lose that house. And also informed consent regarding, let's put this with a lack of information regarding the Italian tax structure and tax obligations. Now, Franco Borio has taught us a lot in the ACOP meetings about this matter. But it would be helpful for making an informed choice as to whether to become director if he or she knew in advance of the ceiling of taxable income. It's not the 35% that it is in the States. And John Franco could tell us exactly what it is depending upon your income. The ceiling, also the ceiling for deductions. I've been told by my commercial it's 19%. I mean, in my house in Seattle, I can deduct all of the interest that I pay on my mortgage. Here, 19%. Also, it would help to know that your property, and Jean Franco did a great job in Bologna on this, scared the boots off me. The property held in the States is taxable. RW40, was that it? I'll never forget it, Jean Franco. I had blood running into my socks.
Don't anticipate my presentation.
And we will have Jean Franco after lunch. One gets the feeling, once we enter the tax system, that one is working for the Italian government. Some people have reported this to me. Let's go to the lack of insurance for directors in case of disaster. Paola Blasi, the former rector of the University of Florence, urged me to get insurance, but I was told that it was not available to directors of private institutions. And if somebody knows something more about this, please let me know. In my judgment, the university should compensate with its own insurance to cover that. Because often some of these disasters would not have been caused indirectly by the director or the dean, but he or she, being legal representative, may have to pay the cost. Lack of adequate staffing. This has been one of the points of alienation with deans. Lack of adequate staffing, thus keeping the dean or director always attending to minutiae and not having time to work the vision or to do strategic planning as a genuinely open alternative. Remember, the national freedom of self-determination, the ability to choose among genuinely open alternatives. Lack of budgetary support for new and creative initiatives, thus leading to the suppression of the creative spirit, leading to the suppression of that wonderful release of creative energies that we feel when we have the circumstantial freedom, in this case the budget, to realize our vision. Finally, lack of trust, and this is, so many people talked about this. A lack of trust of the dean and director by the home campus administration. A lack of trust to make the right decisions. Thus, the lack of autonomy and authority of the dean or director. Thus, micromanaging some directors feel themselves to be executive secretaries. Also, a lack of trust, which is a function of a certain kind of pandering by the home administration out of fear to dissatisfied constituencies, such as parents and their lawyers. No offense intended, John Franco. Also, two persons reported this, that they felt subtly undermined as a director by the home campus over supporting his or her local adversary. And, you know, we all have adversaries, and they can be right on our own campus. Jan Cassius has a mean and hungry look, somebody who wants your job. And where the home department, the home administration ends up subtly over-supporting that person, you feel under-supported. Huh? I'm not talking about myself, by the way, but I've been told this. And then there's the phenomenon of the home campus cultivating the savior genius syndrome, manifest in new upper administrators on the home campus who often know nothing about international education. Among that, 70% of those provosts maybe. Or perhaps a newly appointed home campus study abroad director, but a person perhaps without significant portfolio or experience, appointed to clean up that mess over there. I've heard that often. Just a little word about micromanaging, and I appreciated the comments from the professor there about the sociology, the sociology of HR, and I just want to reiterate what I also said regarding Sasha's talk. Because persons are fundamentally free, I don't think you can effectively manage them insofar as they remain persons and not automatons. I mean, there is a drift towards being an automaton. You can only manage, and I want to just reiterate this, I think it needs to be said, I'd even get the stone cutter out to carve it on the wall. You can only manage in an environment where free persons feel invited and reinforced to do their best work. I'm totally convinced by that. Let's now talk, how are we doing? I want to make sure, good. I'm gone more than a half hour, I'm 33 minutes, but let's see if I can get through this. Alienation through disconnect. A persistent claim from deans and directors of study abroad programs is focused on the disconnect between the home campus and the so-called satellite campus. A disconnect that generates a feeling of alienation and disrespect. The extreme form of this disconnect that was presented to me by way of a metaphor, namely a sidecar detached from a motorcycle and about to crash. That's extreme, but I hope none of you have a program like that. The claim of the disconnect takes many forms. One form would be relative to the evaluation of the director or evaluation of the program. One study abroad director reported that he didn't think the faculty liked him so much, they wanted to evaluate him. And he questioned whether the faculty really was capable of evaluating his work completely. Huh? And here's a letter from him. The SAP, the study abroad director, dean director, serves many constituencies: central administration, the school's faculty, staff, and students, families of alumni and friends of the institution, current and potential donors, prospective employers of students, key persons in the local city government, and the list goes on and on. While faculty have some understanding of the director's responsibilities and activities, with regard to a few of these limited listed constituencies, I'm quite confident that their overall knowledge of the range of the director's activities and associated expectations is sorely limited. The faculty should evaluate the director only in terms of his or her effectiveness in promoting the academic mission of the institute. In all cases, the director should be involved in helping to shape the evaluation instrument. many directors have told me that they were not involved. They were being evaluated. There was no consultation with them about the instrument of evaluation. And they took umbrage at that. Student evaluation of the program. The director dean should have some influence in shaping that instrument as well. But one director indicated that was not the case, and he was not consulted. It was not discussed. There were not open lines of communication. There were misunderstandings, and he felt quite alienated by this. We've already spoken about the disconnect in terms of the lack of intercultural and international understanding on the part of the home administrators and the consequent lack of imagination relative to the opportunity that the study abroad program presents the home campus in terms of its image. Some university presidents have embraced their foreign campus as a true flagship for their effort to project a global image of their respective university, and have invested significant funds and sought capital development. In other words, they wanted to show that their own university as an international university, as having this very serious international face and dimension. This lack of intercultural and international understanding often leads to a lack of recognition of the value of place-specific courses, with home faculty teaching the same course on the study abroad campus as they do on the home campus. I take an example of a course, somebody who was teaching marketing at Gonzaga. I keep telling all the professors, it has to be place-specific. If it's just a repetition of what we do at the home campus, let the students take it at home. Finally, I hired an Italian professor to do marketing, and she took the students to Via San Gallo. There's lots of little businesses there. They weren't marketing themselves very well, and she assigned the students to various businesses. And they got to know the director, the owner of the business, etc., and improved the marketing of that little business. But it was engagement, huh? It wasn't repetition of what could be achieved in Spokane. Also, lack of knowledge of the benefits of intercultural and international encounters through course-related travel sometimes leads, according to some directors, to the fostering of a caricature of the study abroad program as just a travel program, Club Med, or what's worse, a drinking program. Because they can, in this culture, you can drink at an earlier age, etc. We all know that. Because of this lack of understanding of the environment in which the study abroad program operates, which is the cultural, legal, socioeconomic, historical aspects of the environment, sometimes administrators on the home campus expect policies, protocols, and practices, and Sasha talked about this, to be transferred to the study abroad program without varying in form or substance. Here is a brief example provided by the registrar of one of the ACOPI programs. During the add drop week, when students should be able to freely add and drop their classes, being able to log into the system and change their schedule according to their likings and needs, unfortunately, if our add drop week does not correspond to that of the main campus, our students might as well forget about freely adjusting their schedules. They must come to see me for every switch they want to make, and that is a big waste of time. And she wrote a study in frustration for both the students and myself. Also, it was indicated a lack of collaboration between the study abroad program and the home departments relative to giving credit for study abroad courses in the major, the minor, or the core curriculum. Let me take an example from my own university. For many years, the Fine Arts Department would not accept studio art courses or history of art courses offered at Gonzaga in Florence for anything other than elective credit. And our students couldn't show their works painted in Gonzaga in Florence in the senior art show back home. I never understood that, but because the works should speak for themselves, but just because they were painted here, they can't be shown. The good news is that that has now changed, and we're experiencing very real collaboration. There's a lack of recognition, and Sasha talked about this, of the study abroad faculty as highly qualified scholars and teachers. There's lack of any effort also to explore faculty exchanges so the home campus faculty can gain appreciation for the study abroad faculty, instead of questioning their courses or misusing student evaluations to marginalize that faculty. I mean, we can get into a long discussion about student evaluations, but unless there's a certain plethora of those evaluations, how do you know about their reliability? And many faculty have told me that they were dismissed from their university because of one or two student evaluations. Lack of interest by the home faculty teaching at the study abroad program to get to know the study abroad faculty by attending their presentations, for instance, in a pro seminar, where they're presenting the results of their recent research. Lack of effective recruiting and marketing by the home campus about the study abroad program, even on the home campus. And a lack of effective marketing of the mission-related schools that do not have their own study abroad program. And a lack often by the marketers of wanting to confront and extinguish the bad image of the program. Lack of effective advising, an effective advising system on the home campus, and follow-up with the student while he or she is in the study abroad program. Is there follow-up? A lot of students say, I can't get hold of my advisor. My advisor doesn't respond to my emails. I really feel like I'm hanging out here. Some of my own students have said this, and this is not fair. Then lack of attention to significant information and urgent requests that have been communicated to the home campus multiple times over many years, just routinely forgotten and ignored. And let me cite an example of such a discontent, and this is a letter I received recently. I guess the biggest disconnect for me was the situation with one of our buildings, a dormitory. Now, finally, after 18 years, it is resolved. I spoke to our administration about this the first time in 1992, not realizing myself the gravity of the situation. In 1995, I was told by a geometra and a perito that the situation of how many students we had sleeping under one roof was not acceptable, and that if something happened to a student, it was a penal violation and I could go to jail. When this was communicated, nothing was done, and it was somewhat not taken seriously. I had another architect and then another architect officially write to the administration explaining the situation. It was not until we had a fire at this building that the situation was fixed. That is, we now have the fire department signing off on the property saying it is up to code. We have been fortunate at the least. This is just one example. I am often not taken seriously when a situation needs attention. Since the fire, things have changed. Oh well, it only took them 20 years. And in parentheses, he wrote sarcasm. Okay. Another thing that was cited was lack of significant information from the home campus regarding any new academic development relative to registration in courses. And I have anecdotes about that I won't read because I want to have time for discussion if you want discussion. Lack of significant information from the home campus, and Sasha touched partially on this, from the home campus regarding student conduct before approving them to come to the study abroad program. Often the home campus will notify the study abroad staff that a student has a judicial history, but will not give details regarding that history. Or worse, they identify students as having had emotional problems and say, call us if anything happens with this student. Thank you. Lack of understanding and appreciation of the formal travel program. Responding to a caricature that such a program is either anti-academic or does nothing to support the academic side. And finally, a lack of invitation to the home campus of key personnel on the study abroad campus. Problem is the study abroad person has to respond continuously to a person he or she has never met, and they never have a chance to get to know how the students live on the home campus or fully understand the expectations of these students relative to the local campus, to the study abroad campus. This person pointed out it creates resentment, never feeling any appreciation for what you do, rather feeling controlled by the personnel on the home campus. Okay, well, Sasha ended on a positive note. I have a proposal. Because my background is in philosophy, I'm a student of philosophy, it's got a kind of a philosophical bent, and Portia may think it's impractical. I hope it's not, but I propose that there be a meeting of the ACOPI directors and deans to draft a series of policies that would deal effectively with the various modes of alienation and disconnect, promoting a dialogical model of reasonable autonomy, authority, and collaboration. These policies would serve as recommendations and guidelines for campus administrators. The dialogical model, of course, requires openness on the part of both sides to give up or share power. And when all the power is on one side, there's not much dialogue. I always hear people saying, we want a dialogue with the American Indians. Well, how much are you willing to give up? Another recommendation would be that, and this is hard, that study abroad directors negotiate directly with supervisors on the home campus for reasonable autonomy and creative and collaborative self-determination. But I need to close on this note, but you have to be able to walk. You have to be able to walk, and they have to know that you can walk. Thank you. We have, I think, I think we've got a lot of time. Yeah, we have until 12:20, it's only 12:07. Are there observations or questions? Disagreements? Well, like Sasha. Yeah.
Surely these issues have come up already in the past with home campuses, and how have they, home campuses, addressed the issues in the past?
How home campuses addressed?
These issues in the past.
Well, I can only speak for Seattle University, and where I was there for 38 years, and Gonzaga, and I've been there since 1989. There was overlap, but I'm not that old. I have felt support. I read the support I felt when Brunhilde and Siegfried were trying to cannibalize and colonize. I felt support when people were evaluating the program from the home campus without consulting the study abroad campus, Gonzaga and Florence. My supervisor interfered with that process and made sure that that it was up to us to design the instrument for evaluating the program, and also administering that instrument and sending the results to the home campus. It shifted the traffic. So you'd have to ask other directors if there has been success in negotiating. We're talking about reasonable autonomy. We're talking about a collaborative model, a consultative, a power-sharing model. But that may be idealistic, but I aim for that. I aim for a model where maximum respect for persons occurs in the study abroad context. Yeah.
In my experience, at least, part of the problem with resolving this issue of the power relationship is that the individuals change. The faces change too often, both on the home campus and in the study abroad program. And so I think what we really need to do, this is somewhat related to what Sasha was saying about defining things and having a language, but we also need to codify with policies or practices the relationship between the home campus and the study abroad campus, so that when there's a new dean or when there's a new associate dean for student life or a new study abroad director, there's something in writing that says this is what your relationship with this person, not person, but the individual who holds this role is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree with that.
I think since it's a small community, I think we can introduce, if you don't mind introducing yourself so we can share.
Sure. I'm Shelley Story, Associate Dean for Student Life at Gonzaga.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm Gian from Arcadia University. I don't want to give too much away about what I'll discuss tomorrow, but I did want to mention and kind of latch on to a couple of things that have been said. I think when we're talking about human resources, it's important to understand that actually roles have descriptions. The role is not the person. And so it's the roles that have to be managed. And it is important to give the person that freedom to exist. And along those same lines, I'm very cautious of a field which is seems to be growing professionals. And many of those professionals are not moving abroad, do not have experiences abroad, and yet are going into fields of study about international education and managing international education from the United States, from cubicles or fluorescent lit offices in longest parts of the United States, which often will give us this disconnect. And that professionalization, the idea of having a master's in arts in international education without any real experience abroad is a dangerous precedent. And so if we are going to begin to talk about standards, I think it's important to discuss this. Troy touched upon people, and people are eccentric. And very often eccentricities in study abroad is what shifts that frame of mind and that focus and that perception and perceptive ability. And if we get rid of all the eccentricities by standardizing models, we risk not achieving our goal, which in the end is to allow for shifts in perception and judgment.
Can't wait till I hear you talk.
I won't say that tomorrow.
You had back there, you had a question.
I'm Grace, I'm a program director here in Florence for CEA Global Education. And I've been doing this job for 12 years. And I just wanted to thank you for affirming the alienation that we do. And this disconnect, because I think that you touched upon it at its root, in which we must relook at why we're doing study abroad and see what its value is. Where is the value? And it's about the people, and it's in the philosophy of what you were saying. I think you touched on everything, so I didn't really have a question. I just wanted to thank you for your time.
Our students are coming from very small rural towns in the US, and many of them it's the first time they travel abroad. Many times it's the first time they go to a museum. So our mission is really to take them out of a completely different cultural background and to open their minds to a completely new world. And so we deal a lot with not very much the cultural shock, but the different background they have just also by living in a big city. And that's of course our mission in the sense we as educators, we help them, we train them to manage also different surrounding, from traveling to living in a different environment. And then open their minds in terms of pedagogy, academy, and so on. But I find myself also in the role that many of the people which I deal with in home campus, as secretaries in various administrations, have the same background. So most of my work is also to explain in many emails on a daily basis what are the differences between being employed here, compared to staff here and staff there. And so an enormous quantity of my time is just explaining cultural differences between administration and administration. So that is an extra task. And the whole list which you said about lacks applies mostly to my university as well. I'm very lucky because we have a very good dean. I get very much along with the chairs. So we developed a lot of strategies how to resolve the certain lack, the list of lacks which you said. And one of the things is information, communication, and I have a very good person in between as a study abroad coordinator, which helps me in that kind of communication. So I have one proposal that I wanted to add to your proposal of the RCOP, the problems which we face, also the solutions which over time, I'm so sure all of us directors develop strategies which you could add to the list, to the positive list on the side, which would be nice to exchange. But mainly it is about the communication, right? And again, one of the big problems I face, I go once a year to the States and we have these meetings and I tell them my problems, the lack of confidence, the lack of collaboration sometimes, and that helps. But I can't go as often enough that I find myself, because it takes a lot of time to introduce a new chair to the program. It takes a lot of time that the dean is sort of on your side and understands all the legal and fiscal powers we have over here. I mean, it just takes time. We go over, we send our faculty over, we think of sending our staff over to improve their communication. But how much time do I have to do all that? And is it really my role in terms of resolving that kind of
I suffer from the same problem. I'm only 1 month on the home campus where I meet with there are 4 deans that work with me and I work with them for our various tracks we have. Meet with them and then meet with the newly appointed study abroad people, my new boss. We don't get near as much work done. Then there's always the phenomenon of, out of sight, out of mind. I mean, I go back and somehow things that I might have communicated were not heard or were shelved. We give a pretty extensive annual report of our activities every year. And some of my staff who contribute to that annual report don't feel that it's been read by anybody. So but communication is of course the bottom. It's the infrastructure. It's what is absolutely essential. But effective communication. And I'm impressed by the for-profit study abroad programs in this city where they do send representatives. They have the money to recruit nationwide and to promote a certain image of their program. I can't get away from my desk. That's why I'm so fat, because I'm sedentary. Shelley says, let's take a walk. Well, maybe. And then of course the spaghetti screams for wine and the wine screams for spaghetti. We're getting close to lunchtime. But anyway, not about my fat. I think you're touching it. You're touching a nerve of something that's so critical to the success of what we're doing. Effective communication. And there are serious blocks to that. I wish you the best. I like what your program is doing, attracting students from small towns in Ohio. Did you say Ohio? Iowa, yeah. When I went to this program in Florence, there were 3 of us from Butte, Montana, and it's just an old mining camp. And we started kind of a revolution. Everybody wanted to send their kid there. We had to pay our own way over. Nobody had any money in that town. But it was really powerfully, as they say, transforming. I mean, I was never the same after that. Opened all the chakras, as they say. Other observations, questions, disagreements, whatever? Yeah.
I think, and this is maybe a bit controversial, so I'm going to try to present this as tactfully as possible. But I think part of a strategy for fostering communication with home campus and gaining more independence abroad, as you said in your talk, needs to include some form of, perhaps among active programs or on an individual basis, some form of checks and balances, because I know we others have suffered from situations, or suffer now from situations in the past where administrators became too autonomous, too powerful, which scared the home campus. And so now the home campus wants more control.
I got you.
I mean, that has been a problem, as I said. And how you do that, I don't know.
Well, that's why I was proposing a dialogical model, collaborative.
Yeah.
What I do is the dean here is when I want to hire somebody, I send in the CV of the person to the appropriate chair person and a syllabus of the course and ask for their blessings or make recommendations. It's collaborative, it's dialogical. Same with the upper administration. I don't want to be radically autonomous because that's unfair to the home institution. And they're the credit granting institution. In the budget, I mean, that has to be negotiated annually, and if I'm running away and or if I'm doing things that are crooked, I mean, I know one director, they had bought a new building, and he made sure that his family would inherit, it's like the old popes, they would inherit, if he were to die, 30% of the building. What? That's an abuse of a major sort, and that can be very difficult. If you've got some Lone Ranger galloping off with the funds of the program or doing things that aggravate the home departments and the home deans and colleges and what have you, you're in trouble. Because they will respond, and they have the power.
But it seems to me in our interest as study abroad programs to build in a system that reassures the home campus that
Well, it's a dialogical model, get of collaboration, consultation, get that empower sharing.
Or Dracula from Johns Hopkins University of Bologna. I'm finding all this kind of cathartic. I had food poisoning yesterday. I wasn't even sure if I was going to come. Now I'm delighted that I did because I feel suddenly less alone. But the flip side to that is that every single thing you described, I've experienced. Personally, I've been doing this for 13 years. I mean, Blackboard, the registration system for Johns Hopkins, was taken down for maintenance from like 1 in the morning to 6 a.m. Baltimore time, which means our students could use it. And then all the timestamps when they turn in assignments, but that's just a tiny thing compared to some of the larger issues of trust and power sharing. And I admire, and I do think you're an idealist when you talk about the dialogical model, because ultimately, they're our bosses in the end. I mean, they can close us with the flick of a switch. And so, I guess, if anything else were to, the downside to all this is that I think it's endemic. I think it's just the nature of what we do that we are constantly going to have to deal with, long spans of them not paying any attention to us, and then there's some small crisis and suddenly they come in and they want to just run the show, right? And then they get a new person in and we have to re-educate them, go through the process again. But what it tells me is two things. One is that if nothing else comes from this, at least we could have a sort of group therapy session where we talk about it. And two, what really strikes me is how much I'm sort of astonished at how much I admire all these folks here who are going through the exact same thing I do and seem to be pulling it off. And so I think that it's actually quite amazing, and there's a brilliant group of people in this room. I think they don't realize that at the home campus, how hard and what a real combination of sort of Machiavellian and deftness and diplomacy and cunning and smarts and everything you need to operate. And then not even to mention the fact that we're doing this in Italy, because all the other meetings I come to, all we do is complain about what it's like to do business in Italy. So that was my comment.
There's, I'm gonna add one last point to that, but there is this survey of how difficult. You sent that to me. You talked. Yeah, you sent it to me for the first time. I'm gonna talk about the survey of how difficult it is to run a business in
doing
kind of.
business in Italy.
What is the title of that?
It's the World Bank Index of Ease of Doing Business.
Have you heard that World Bank Index of Ease of Doing Business? Italy has the 86.
It actually moved up a little bit. We had 79 after Jamaica and Madagascar.
Okay. So how easy it is to run a business in Italy?
Any other observations?
Jerry Graham, the Jesuit chaplain at Florence. I'm just reminded very much of someone, I'm sorry I'm going to sound like a preacher, a priest I'm very reminded of someone who said that when you love somebody or fall in love with somebody, you don't first of all give something to them. If you love somebody or if you fall in love with somebody, you first of all receive something from them. And what you receive from them are their questions. Their questions become your questions. And you love somebody and all of a sudden, you find yourself asking, you find yourself noticing things in the world and trying to solve problems that are their questions because you have made their questions your own. And so it reminded me very much of Dean Burke's talk that we need a care. I think another way to say what you're saying, or what's being said here, is that the home campus often doesn't care about the questions. And Sasha was fantastic to me, you see, in delineating the whole range of questions that define this field, which was amazing. How do we get someone to care about our questions? It seems like to me that's the question kind of behind the dialogical question. How do we enter into a relationship in which people will care and they will receive care of our questions and they will care about us? And I wish I had an answer. I don't have an answer. I'm sorry, but it seems like too that's another way of framing the issue.
Well, with those pious thoughts, let us sally forth to wait the coming of lunch.